and welcome to Human Ascension with Ellie. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different to usual. I've currently undertaken some elective surgery that I've been waiting to do for a while, and I'm at home recovering, and I'm probably watching and listening to this episode just like you are at the current moment. I put out a request to my viewers on the Ellie Dreams Down Under channel on YouTube, asking them to choose one of their favorite tarot readings that I've done since I've had the channel, so that I could use it as an example to show you what I do when I'm not here on the radio show. Because every day of the week, I produce a new video on the Ellie channel, Ellie Dreams Down Under channel, every single day of the week, rain or shine, even when I'm having surgery. Don't ask me how. I'm a miracle worker. I'm a machine. It just keeps happening. But anyway, there was quite a number of requests, but I had a request from someone that you might know. This name might be familiar to you, and that is Renee Barnett. And Renee is the host of Night Vision Radio, which is the show that airs directly after mine. Renee and I are friends. Renee is a wonderful person. I love talking to her. She's a lot of fun. And she knows so much about so many things. She's been in the game for a really long time. And every time I talk to her, I learn something. This actually is an example of something that we have in common. There was a fellow by the name of James E McDonald. He was an American physicist. He was born in around about 1920 and he died in 1971. We have him in common because although he was an American physicist, he came to Australia in the 1960s to investigate a UFO sighting that was a massive example of all of these experiences in one single location, experiencing a phenomenon that they just couldn't understand. It was something that took place at a high school not far from where I live, and it actually happened, I think it was in the year that I was born, just a few months after I was born, or just a few months before I was born, if I can remember correctly. The school in question was Westall High School in Victoria, Australia. And the experience that occurred was that the entire school of children and teachers who were outdoors, I think during the lunchtime period, all en masse, over 100 people, witnessed some UFOs, one of which landed in a field behind the school. This was a massive event that took place, especially for the 1960s, and it resulted in all kinds of military and governmental swamping of the area, including the US military that showed up within 24 hours. There was a particular student at the school that went missing at the time. She was one of the closest encounter experiences of the moment, and she was never seen again, and people were never quite the same. There was also a big hush-up that took place, and quite a number of the students who were quite young at the time are still alive today, and they've told their stories saying that they were put under a tremendous amount of pressure by the Australian government and also the US government to forget what they had seen in the sky or what they had seen land behind the school in the big field. So it was only something that took place about 20 minutes away from where I live, something like that, and it was very close to the year of my birth. And this physicist, James E McDonald, happened to be in Australia shortly after this incident. I think that he was commissioned to do a study, a cosmological study or something of that nature. But he also, in his spare time, was a bit of a UFO enthusiast or ufologist, and he used to investigate episodes that had taken place that he was aware of. He took a real interest in this Westall High School experience of UFO phenomena. And so that's where we have our connection. Anyway, what transpired was really peculiar. He experienced some backlash by the US government, and he ultimately died in really bizarre circumstances. If you haven't heard of James E. McDonald or the episode of how he died, this might be a tarot reading that you really will enjoy, because the backstory that I provide before the reading is really quite comprehensive and there's lots of information to learn. This is a real head scratcher, this particular cold case, because the way in which James E. McDonald was, people claimed that he died, really, it's kind of impossible. And you'll find out why. So let's get started on this tarot reading. The tarot reading is from the files of my existing tarot readings that all appear in various playlists in the Ellie Dreams Done Under channel. I've got nearly 2,000 tarot readings to choose from if you ever want to go and take a look. This is Renee's favorite from the entire bunch. Maybe because it's got a bit of that paranormal and a bit of that bizarre, and it sure does have a lot of mystery. So I will talk to you again on the other side of this reading. And I hope you enjoy it. I actually am aware of this purported UFO sighting. It took place in early 1966 in the town of Clayton, or city of Clayton, which is a suburb in Melbourne. It's actually not too far away from where I live, although I live in a far more rural area than that. It's become quite built up. Chances are, in around about 1966, Clayton and the Westall High School area was probably similar to the kind of environment that I live in right now. On this day in April, I think it was, 1966, school was taking place at Westall High School in the usual way. There were some students who were outdoors doing PE or sport. There were other students who were in the classroom learning a desk-based sort of subject. Life was per normal. There were around about 200 of the school's students and teachers outside, mostly students, at around about a certain time of the day. And they looked up and found that there was a sort of a flying saucer shaped object. Actually, I believe there were 3 objects up in the sky. Of course, everything stopped, and some people actually ran indoors to tell the teachers that were in the classroom that this is what they were seeing. So a lot of the students actually came outside, and a lot of the teachers came outside to take a look. During this period of time, one of the unidentified objects actually started to move behind the school into an open field area and appeared to be landing. And some of the students ran to that field area to actually see what was going on. Apparently there were 3 girls who jumped the fence and went into the field, the fence for the school, went into the field and saw the UFO that had landed. One of them, who was from Yugoslav descent, her parents, I believe, were non-English speaking Yugoslav-born people, and she was born in Australia, or at least English speaking anyway. She became quite hysterical and had to be removed from the scene by her friend. She was later taken to hospital, and I'm going to return to her in a moment. The other 2 girls, one of them accompanied her friend when she started to become hysterical, and one of them was left behind and said that she watched this UFO sit for a moment in the field. She could feel it radiating heat. It made no sound. It didn't seem to show any fumes or anything were coming out of it or anything like that, but she could feel the radiation of heat from it. She then watched it about a minute later go back up into the sky. It went directly vertical and then stopped for a moment and then disappeared in really just impossible speed. She said that she's never, even to today, ever seen anything move that fast before in the sky. She watched it go. She was stunned and excited, went back to school along with all of the other students, and they carried on their day in whatever way you would do if you had just seen a series of UFOs in the 1960s. The news is actually that immediately following this incident, maybe even later in the day, police arrived, military arrived, the Australian military. There was a huge response from the government and government resources. And the students were all interviewed, the teachers were all interviewed. And collectively, all of the students that ranged, from 12 to 18, I guess, because that would be high school age, They were collectively told that this episode never existed, it never happened. They all saw something that they've completely misconstrued, and that the incident never took place. And they were also told never to talk of it again. One of the teachers, I've actually seen him being interviewed in later life. He would probably have been in his late 70s by the time I saw this interview. He reported that he had a visit from the US military a few days later or a few weeks later, and they sat him, well, actually what they did was they implied that it was in his best interests to go to wherever they were, to their military base, to have a discussion. He felt that he really didn't have any choice, and that he was being summoned, and that bad things would happen to him if he didn't go. And so he did go. During that interview, he claims that he was told by a member of the US military that that they believe that the incident never took place. And he said, but it did take place. I was there. I actually saw it happen. And they said, no, actually it didn't take place. But what we are concerned about is that it appears that perhaps you've been drinking on the job. And if that were the case, we would have to report you to the education department, which means you obviously would lose your ability to teach and lose your job. And he felt that that was an implied, well, probably quite not exactly an implied threat, more of an explicit threat. And that's what he stated in recent years. He felt that he was compelled to keep quiet, and that he was being told that he was not permitted to discuss the matter. And then the matter was never discussed. The young Yugoslav girl had some good friends at the school, and I saw an interview with one of them. That particular woman now would be somewhere in her, during the interview that I saw, would have been somewhere in her late 50s. I think the interview was at least 5 years old, so maybe 5 to 10 years. Maybe she's in her 60s now. She said she was quite close to this Yugoslav girl. That the young girl spoke English. Her parents didn't speak English. They used to go to each other's houses to play. And she knew exactly where this young girl lived because she'd been to her house on numerous occasions and played in her home and met her parents. She had become quite hysterical and was claimed to have been taken to the hospital, but she never ever returned to school again. And so her friends were becoming quite concerned for her welfare. This woman said that a few days later she went to visit her home just to check in and say hi and to make sure she was okay. And when she went to the home that she'd been to before, where she knew that this is where her friend lived, she knocked on the door, and a person she'd never seen before answered the door and said she must have the wrong address because this family that she was claiming to know had never lived there. They weren't there, they didn't live there, and they had never lived there. She said that she felt that it was surreal because she knew she'd been to this home before. It's not like she was guessing. She knew exactly which house her friend lived in, but she was being told that this was not true. Her friend had never lived there, and that the occupant of the home, didn't even know who she was talking about, and that she must be mistaken. She said she never ever saw her friend again, never heard of her again, never knew what happened to the family. All she knows is that they disappeared. So there's that. That's really interesting. That's in Australia, and that was the year of my birth. It was actually just a few months before I was born. Some months later, a physicist from Tucson, Arizona, whose name was James E. McDonald, happened to be in Australia doing a study on behalf of the university with regards to something else. He actually was educated. He had a Bachelor of Arts in Chemistry from the University of Omaha that he received in 1942. He had a Master's of Science in Meteorology from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which he obtained in 1945. And then he completed a PhD study in physics at Iowa State University in 1951. He taught at the University of Chicago for a year. He then established or helped to establish a meteorology and atmospheric program at the University of Arizona and became professor of meteorology at the University of Arizona. He was actually already studying the phenomenon of unidentified flying objects from as early as 1954, when he was actually driving with two other meteorologists and spotted in Arizona and spotted an unidentified flying object that none of these three men could identify. It was described at the time as being a pretty unspectacular sighting, apart from the fact that they couldn't tell what the object was that they could see. But it sparked an interest in him, and it led to a lifelong ambition to sort of study the phenomenon of UFO. And so that was the year 1954 when he first started taking an interest. By the mid-60s, he started talking about UFOs very openly, and was actually asked to speak to Congress on two occasions, I believe. One time, I think it was in the early 60s, and then in the 60s, in the mid-60s, sorry. And then I think it was again shortly prior to his death in the early 1970s. James McDonald was married and had 6 children. And by the time he was happily married to a point, but then the UFO studies, according to the research that I've done, appeared to interfere with his relationship. He seemed to also be described as someone whose personality changed. He was being slighted by a number of different scientists because of the fact that he was interested in the UFO phenomenon. He was also heckled by members of Congress, particularly in his second address to Congress. He was being told that he wouldn't be taken seriously because of the fact that he believed in UFOs and things like that. He also had his movement sort of scrutinized. James McDonald also managed to amass a few enemies, and this was in regards to his strong views with regards to the importance of the UFO phenomenon. There is a very brief interview with him that I found on YouTube, where he actually, I think it belongs to the ABC archives, and he stated in that interview that he considers the study of UFOs, or the threat of the unexplained nature of UFOs, to be the most important matter for the world at the time that should actually be studied. More important than anything else, because he said that without the knowledge and the understanding, it poses a risk to humankind. And he was ridiculed for that. He also was very critical of studies that diminished, or that he was also very critical of studies that sort of downgraded the importance of UFOs, or the significance of UFOs, particularly if there were no explanations as to why. There was one particular testimony that he gave to Congress in 1968, where he said that he stated in his opinion that UFOs are entirely real, and we don't know what they are because we've laughed them out of court. He believes that there was a possibility that they were extraterrestrial devices, and that he believed that we were being surveilled by an advanced technology from potentially from another planet. He also picked up on particular congressional reports and stated that he didn't find them credible because they had laughed off or discarded around 30% of the sightings of UFOs that they had been studying, even though they hadn't attempted to explain what they were, and that he found that to be infuriating and also counterproductive. And when he made comments like that and spoke in language like that, it served to actually create rifts between him and other members of the scientific community. In 1967, the Office of Naval Research gave James McDonald a small budget in order to conduct his own UFO research, to look at the incident of whether or not these UFOs may have actually been misidentified clouds. He was able to peruse the files of Project Blue Book, which was held by the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and ultimately he concluded that the Air Force was mishandling UFO evidence. During most of the 1960s, James McDonald also devoted much of his time to trying to persuade journalists, politicians, and also his scientific colleagues to take UFOs more seriously and to actually talk about them more openly with the American public. as a matter of being an issue of public safety. Shortly after the 1966 Westall High School incident in Victoria, Australia, James McDonald happened to be studying this cloud formation research on behalf of the Office of Naval Research in Australia. And so he was nearby, and he spent some of his free time looking at the issue of this UFO sighting and trying to investigate that more closely. This was held against him by an adversary that he had sort of encountered over his lifetime, whose name was Philip J. Klass. Now, Philip Klass was a aviation journalist and a skeptic when it came to UFOs. And when he discovered that James McDonald was studying UFOs because he happened to be in Australia at the time because he was studying this meteorology cloud formation study, he actually made a complaint against him and said that he was using his funding to study the UFOs, I guess, illegally or unethically or something like that. An investigation was conducted, and it was demonstrated that James McDonald was actually spending very little money on anything other than the study, and that he was doing it in his own time. But it still helped to diminish his credibility and created a bit of controversy for him. During the later period of his life before he died, and he still did die quite young, he was becoming very professionally isolated, and also his interest in UFOs and the manner in which he was being treated by the general community, scientific community, was beginning to interfere with his marriage. James McDonald had suffered tremendously because of his insistence that UFOs be taken seriously and be studied for the safety of mankind. And also he'd suffered reputationally as well as a result of his interest in UFOs. And then in March of 1971, his wife had asked him for a divorce. So this is when it gets a little bit weird. I mean, the whole thing's a bit weird, but this is when it really gets a bit weird. A month after his wife asked for divorce, it's claimed that James McDonald attempted to commit suicide by shooting himself in the head. He was rushed to the hospital where he happened to be the next day when he allegedly disappeared. And the injury that I'm aware of that he sustained was that he shot himself in the head and was blinded by that shot. So he was blind. He had just been shot, critically ill, I would say, if you shoot yourself in the head to the point where you are blinded, and hospitalized. The next day, he's reported to have disappeared from the hospital, and he was not seen again. But in the middle of June 1971, a family that were out walking found his body close to a creek near the in a sort of a desert area, but obviously there was some water at the Canada del Oro Wash near Tucson. His body was partly buried and later identified as being James McDonald. Near the body was a .38 caliber revolver, as well as a suicide note. Now, he's listed as someone who committed suicide, and that's how he died. But the most obvious questions that came to mind straight away were that he attempted to commit suicide by shooting himself in the head the first time, but didn't leave a note. The second time, he managed to get a .38 from the hospital where he had only been rushed to the day before, even despite the fact that he was blind, and it was the very next day after he'd been shot, and he was in the hospital. He disappeared, went to a creek somewhere in a reasonably isolated area. I guess if it was in a desert area, but somewhere close to water, I'm not even sure, that doesn't even make sense, but anyway, and was found to have shot himself with a .38 after leaving a suicide note, despite the fact that he was blind. And I don't know whether they give out guns at the hospital. Maybe in Texas they do these days. But it just doesn't make sense, does it? Let's find out about this mysterious incident of James E. McDonald's death related to his study of UFOs and the enemies he made along the way. Did he really commit suicide? And is there more to know about his writings and the investigations that he's done? Let's put some cards down. It's a really weird thing. James McDonald, physicist from Tucson, Arizona. There's crossover there when it comes to the 1966 Westall High School sighting of multiple UFOs, the threatening behavior towards the students and teachers by military at the time. US military was specifically named, but this was Australian soil, so there's an assumption that it was also the Australian military. The fact that James McDonald crossed the path of this incident as well and conducted his own studies. Facing ridicule among media, in politics, and also in the scientific community. And then this strange sort of double attempt at suicide, one of which is completely inexplicable. A blind man disappearing from hospital and grabbing his gun and writing a note. Before he shoots himself in the head by a creek in an isolated area. Why? Why would he do that? How would he even get there if he's blind? It does seem really strange. Let's find out what this is about. Okay, James E. McDonald. So we have the signifier and the challenge card. Conscious thoughts, subconscious thoughts, the past, and then the pinnacle moment. Okay. So the signifier is the Five of Wands, and it's challenged by the Page of Swords. The Five of Wands in reverse, challenged by the Page of Swords. The Five of Wands in reverse is about refusing to argue, reaching resolution, and having inner demons. It's challenged by the Page of Swords, which is a mentally agile, experimenting energy that tests its surroundings. It's also about there being a rapid message. So we've got this... Yep. We've got this refusing to argue and reaching resolution element and the inner demons. Now imagine that there's a sort of a cover-up of some kind, not wanting to really let the truth out. There would be an agreement, a murmur amongst those that had the power to either release information or not. And the decision, the agreement there is to keep the peace and keep things quiet, to reach that resolution and not to... for there to be no outliers. Now that keeps a matter under wraps, but there's an inner demon that remains. So even though nobody stands out and it's all kept quiet, It's simmering there just below the surface. And I think that's what this card represents. It's also challenged. It's challenged by a mentally agile entity. And I believe that mentally agile entity may be James McDonald, who is experimental and willing to test the surroundings, willing to speak out on things, willing to test the misconceptions of other people, and willing to experiment in the belief of things that may have been considered just too hot to handle by the group that are willing to contain this information. The fact that there's a rapid message soon may mean that James McDonald was about to make a disclosure of some kind, and that could be something that's relevant. But there's definitely a friction and interaction here between something that mustn't be said and something that's about to be said. And I think that's a good way to look at the baseline here. On the conscious level, we've got the devil in reverse. Now, this is an extreme form of addiction and codependency. It also is about ultimate control. It's very abusive in nature. So addiction and codependency appears when the devil is upright. When it's in reverse, it's times 100. This is really strong, controlling behavior. And I'm not sure what it relates to yet, but let's just... to be honest, I think I do. But let's just wait and see what the cards say, because I want to test my idea before I share it with you. All right. So the devil in reverse is an extreme form of control. Okay. On the conscious level. On the subconscious level, we've got the Seven of Swords in reverse. And the Seven of Swords is about reclaiming what's lost, or taking what you believe is yours and doing it in a sneaky, stealth-like way. This theft or reclamation would have taken place here when the card is in reverse, and there's an element of regret or remorse associated with that action, and that's in the subconscious. I'm not going to pass judgment just yet. Let's just see what happens when we get to the bottom line. We've got, but it does look as though we have a really extreme act of control. Now, killing another person would fall under that category. And then we've got this attempt to reclaim something that can be regretful at the time. But it may also, because it appears in the subconscious, it may be the reason for the action. So this could have been an admission by James that he was about to disclose something here. And the reason why I look for clues where cards might be married together, and we've got a sword suite and a sword suite. And there is an element of regret here, and the regret may be the fact that speaking to the wrong person at the wrong time may have actually put James McDonald in danger, and that's where the regret appears. But let's just see what the cards say. In the past, we've got here the Fool. And when the Fool is upright, it's about jumping into the unknown and having faith that the universe will catch you. This is all about, I'm ready. I'm ready to actually move forward. I'm not thinking about I've got no baggage. I'm not thinking about what the consequences might be. I'm open. I'm open to a new life, a new experience, a new something. This could be an expression of open-mindedness that appears for James. The fact that he was not going to close his mind in accordance to what was considered to be appropriate at the time. He was open to learning unfettered and unrestricted. And I think that's what appears here in the past. His mind and his heart was open to receive whatever it was that came his way, even if it didn't appear to be something agreeable with the general consensus. That pinnacle moment is the Ten of Cups. Now this throws a bit of a spanner in when it comes to the reason behind James's demise, because this is about family, harmony, peace, joy and love. Now Betsy McDonald had asked for a divorce 1 month prior to James's death, whether it be by suicide or whether it was a malicious act. When a gun is involved, twice, because if it happened once, I could have added accident. But when it happens twice, I think the accident part can be eliminated. It was either 2 attempts at suicide, one of them was successful, or it was 2 attempts at murder and one of them was successful. It's highly unlikely that one was an attempted suicide, the other one was a successful murder, and vice versa. I think the odds are probably more in favor of it being either murder or suicide in both cases. It was beginning to look that way, but here we have the family element, and it does appear to be that pinnacle moment. This is a defining moment for the reading. So let's keep going. The way he sees himself, okay. The way others see him, or the environment in which he sits. Hopes and fears. Yep. And then the final answer. Right, okay. So the way he sees himself, or saw himself, was the Ace of Swords. You see here, this fool has their heart open to whatever will be. They make no judgment. They're going to say it as it is. Well, this appears here. He considered himself to be the truth teller. So the Ace of Swords is the ultimate when it comes to communication, intellect. This is the mentally agile entity who yields the sword of truth. And this is all about the truth. James McDonald was on a mission for the truth. He was not, I don't believe he was crazy. In fact, I believe he was very mentally agile. I don't believe that he was corrupted in some way or pushed down some path, because he has this openness that actually is quite virgin in nature, and would mean that he's an unadulterated pursuer of the truth. And he considered himself to be 100% in pursuit of that justice of truth, the real facts, what's really happening. He wasn't one of those that swept it all under the carpet for a quiet life. He was willing to test his surroundings and to actually pursue the truth. The way he was viewed by others, or the environment in which he sat, was the 8 of Pentacles. Now, the 8 of Pentacles is about education, career focus, training, career change, something, all about those things. I actually think that this is sort of a very soft definition for this position. We have here the focus on training, education. So this could be university, the environment of the university that he's in, the environment of learning that he's in. You'd want to have an inquisitive, agile mind who's open to new knowledge if you're in a learning environment. I am, however, conscious of this sort of, I think he may have been a threat to other people within his immediate professional community. Now, I'll tell you the reason why. The dynamic that appears here now is we have an ultimate truth teller who is a very agile mind and open to learning new things, regardless of what that means. His ultimate goal was just to be seeker of the truth. He was in an environment where learning and expansion of the mind is considered to be the primary point of the environment, to be in education and training and learning at a university. That would imply that you should have an open mind and an open heart, that you should be seeking the truth, that you should allow for your mind to be agile. But there's an element of reclaiming something here that I'm not sure that I've quite captured. And it could be that he was reclaiming his truth and there's regret there. But I think what these cards are brought up is another possibility. And that is that those in his environment that also had careers to protect may have been threatened by him in some way. And it was their attempt to reclaim something, their attempt to get away with something that led down a path of regret. This is his passing. And I think the fact that it appears as something like the Devil in reverse instead of something like the Star that would be really positive or or something very empathetic that appears with the cup suite, like the Queen of Cups or something. I actually think that what this demonstrates is that it was an unwilling death, that it was not a suicide. And that, you know, I'm really sorry, but just common sense tells me that a man who's just shot himself in the head to the point where he's blind is not going to get out of hospital the very next day all by himself, find a way to transport himself from the hospital to some creek in the middle of nowhere in an area that's described as desert, somewhere along the way find himself a 38 caliber gun, write a note despite the fact that he's blind. I couldn't even find a pen, to be honest, but write a note despite the fact that he's blind, and then shoot himself again, just to be sure. And this kind of supports my doubts. What else supports my doubts is the hopes and fears card. So the Hanged Man in the hopes and fears card is about being blocked. It's about being prevented from achieving what it is you set out to do. If you, it's also there are also slightly other different meanings as well, but primarily it's about, you know, being unable to reach out for something that you want to get. It's just out of reach, or being unable to stop a moving element, or being unable to get something that has stalled to move again. It's all about not being able to sort of achieve what it is you're trying to get activated. It means you have to let go of what you're after. It makes you powerless in some way. And I think that this was a hope card to render James and his inquisitive open heart and open mind, and his inquisitive mind, and his desperate, devoted search for the truth, to put it on hold, to stop it, and to prevent it and make it powerless. And I think that was the hope. That was the reason for the unwilling death of James McDonald. So I do think his death was created by someone else. The final outcome is the High Priestess in reverse. And the High Priestess in reverse is about emerging from depression. It can also be a predatory card, and it's about the revealing of secrets. I think there was a risk there of him revealing secrets. I think that I'm going to have to get clarification on the element of family here, but I think that he was pursued. So this was a predatory element. And then the emerging from depression, I think also, you know, it sits beneath a family card. I think that perhaps what may have happened was his demise was going to occur at some point. But I think there may have been a weak point in him that allowed for this to take place, made him vulnerable, perhaps, because of the issue of his family. Perhaps his strength came from his family, and something at the time of his wife asking for a divorce created a vulnerability in him that gave people an open door to be able to for something to happen to him, where they were able to pursue him, because this is a predatory card, and prevent him from being able to use the attributes that he had here to be able to speak of the unspeakable. And I think this was the attempt to prevent him from speaking about things that actually he felt that the world should know. I'm running really over on time, but I want to know if there is here, I'm going to use all of the deck actually. I just want to get this loose end tied up when it comes to James McDonald's card here, which is about family harmony, peace, joy, and love that appeared in his that pivotal moment. If I can get some clarity on this. I think it would have been clearer if the card had appeared in reverse, because then it would have sort of shown that there was an element of discord in the family. Okay, 10 of Wands, the 4 of Pentacles in reverse, and the 8 of Wands. Okay. Stress, tough times, burden and responsibility, being afraid to leave your comfort zone and being really stingy about holding on to things really, really tightly. And then we've got here change, motivation and getting your ducks in a row. I can see where he would desperately want to hang on to what he's got. I can see the stress that appears here. This is a change in dynamic and allowing it to create getting ducks in a row. I think he just lost his safety net. So let's put down another card and let's just double check. We've got Ace of Cups. This is about falling out of love, losing love. That's exactly what happened. Let's try one more. Okay, yep. All right, so it was, there was a pivotal moment when it came to the breakdown of his relationship that I think created a weakness in him. And the weakness may have afforded him that fateful moment where he spoke to the wrong person about how he really felt, or something like that. That he dropped the ball for a moment and that made him very vulnerable. There was the stress there, the desperation to hold on, giving someone an opportunity there was that falling out of love and the opportunity that it presented. But you see, ultimately, it led to the ending of James McDonald. This card is about endings, beginnings, transformation, transition, and possibly death as well. I think that it was the pivotal moment for him had to do with his relationship. I don't think his wife arranged for him to be killed or anything. I think the moment made him vulnerable, and that's what happened. I'm still not sure. It does seem as though perhaps his death was not at his own hands. I want to ask that specific question. Did James McDonald kill himself? Did he commit suicide? Okay. I don't think he committed suicide. This is the same card that came up before. This is also the same card that came up before. This is about getting your ducks in a row and wanting there to be a change. This is a predatory card, and this is an element of victimhood. I actually think he was a victim of something, and that he had a moment of weakness, and that the passing was not something, it may have been categorized as suicide at the time, but the cards would indicate that there was more to it than that. I think he'd become a nuisance, but he was very protective of himself. But then in that final sort of month of his life, his sense of self-preservation must have been diminished by grief and stress and loss of love and things like that. And that made him really vulnerable. And then what happened was that his life was taken. I feel compelled to go on, and I'm going to do one more. I can't help myself. Okay, I've got to. So let's ask that other question. Did James McDonald lose his life because of his study of UFO phenomenon? Is that what it was? So the Queen of Cups sometimes comes up as a card of empathy that can mean a person's passing. Temperance is about balance, moderation, and getting things right. And then Justice in reverse is about a karmic kind of justice. It's about a poetic justice in a way. justice and moderation and empathy. We then have loss and bereavement. I think, yes, and I think the message was that he was just a little bit too out there for the mainstream, for the moderate, balanced viewpoint. You see, I'm using the language of the cards. What he was lacking was that temperance, and it was just getting too much. Every time they punched him, he punched back, or every time they punched him, he got up and kept going. So there you go. Quite a mystery. But I do suspect that it's not all as it has been documented to be. The cards seem to think that there's more to it. So there you go. That was the James E. McDonald tarot reading from the Ellie Dreams and Under channel. If tarot is something that interests you, or you enjoy these sorts of cold case examples, I have a playlist of cold case tarot readings. I also have a playlist of UFO and paranormal tarot readings. I've got them on spirituality and politics, world affairs, you name it, I've done it. I even do personal readings on the channel as well. So feel free to come and take a look. It's Ellie Dreams Down Under on YouTube. You can also find me on Facebook, Threads, Instagram, Patreon, and also Shopify. My patrons on Patreon, they also get exclusive bonus content and early release of some of my videos as well. So check it out. You can find all of those social media links on the Ellie Dreams Down Under channel on YouTube. So thanks so much for joining me today. If you are listening on one of KGRA's broadcasting platforms, thank you so much. Don't forget, if you want to be part of the chat community at KGRA, use the promo code Ellie, which is me, to get 30% off your subscription. Back to our usual programming next week. Thank you very much for joining me. That's all there is for today, and it's been a pleasure. Until next time.